Welcome to Gold Derby's production design panel with Emmy nominees. I'm David Buchanan, joined by Patrick Howe from Only Murders in the Building. Patrick, this third season of Only Murders obviously centers around this big theatrical event that Martin Short's character is throwing, Death Rattle Dazzle, new musical. How excited were you to take the aesthetic that you had established in the first two seasons and take it out of the apartment building and put it into a totally different space?
I was really delighted to be able to do that. It was exciting to get out of the building a little bit, excuse me, and I was so looked forward to sort of getting back to my original roots of my theater background in terms of design, and it was so fun to integrate really my whole career of television designing. And my initial studies of theater design, and to be able to use them hand in hand. I love that so much.
I wanted to ask you exactly that, which is, how much of a theater buff are you, and what shows and ideas or designers came to mind when you heard the concept of what this musical would be, and, the constraints of the time and space that you had to pull it off?
Yeah, it was such an exciting process to go through, because what was unique about it was that normally, a production designer or a designer for a live theater, particularly a musical, you would have a book and a score. All of the other creative contents would exist already. So you'd have your music lyrics and book to be inspired by, and to get one and to draw from, and to get one's design ideas. But this was kind of the opposite, where all there was really a treatment by our showrunner that came down to just being a verbal, some good comprehensive meetings between John Hoffman and myself, but it was really just telephone conversations of John describing what if there was a script, this is what it would be like, because it was never going to be written. There was never the actual script written, not even a whole plot of a whole piece. We just knew that the audience was only ever going to see little snippets of it. And so that's an awkward thing to get inspiration to design from, because again, I don't have a tone or a quality of any of the songs or anything to listen to be inspired by. But fortunately, John's descriptions were quite good, and he was able to just really describe the basics of like where the show should take place, which was taking place on a Nova Scotia lighthouse. And John would just say things like, the lighthouse, we should see the exterior of it. There should be some rocks, because we'll find a dead body on the rocks. And you see there's a set of triplets that live inside the lighthouse, and the triplets are going to be accused of murdering the person that's on so like you would just describe plot points. And so I just would piece together bits of the puzzle of what the set requirements would be. And I did a lot of research of what Nova Scotia lighthouses looked like at the turn of the century. And fortunately, there was a lot of commonality between them. And so I picked the best elements from them to work from. And inspirations came from a lot of different people. We also had some different other sets in the show besides that musical that were theater pieces, which was really nice. Because we did a Richard Rodgers 1962 introducing Diane Carroll, because the character Loretta, that was a show that she saw as a kid, and so was able to represent however we wanted a sort of made-up version of No Strings that theoretically took place in Paris, and that was wonderful to do. And then there was another cause to give an introduction to the history of our fictitious theater, the Gooseberry, which was this like a little scene of Ashes to Ashes, which was as if it was done for the debut of the theater, or near its inception in the 19 teens, or maybe 20 or so. So it was a very sort of primitive style. It was theater at the time, and I took inspirations from Robert Edmund Jones and this classic designer, several other people as well, to sort of just collage a lot of interesting bits together.
And how early did you decide to use the United Palace? I think that's where you shot. So how early did you know that that's where you were going to do it, and how influential was that decision on the scale of the sets that you were going to make for Death Rattle Dazzle?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we did use the United Palace, and we were locked into presenting it as the United Palace, even from season 2, the last episode where we see Ben Glenroy on stage for a play, which turns out to have been a version of this play. When we see him collapse on stage at the end of season 2, that was done at the United Palace. So we had kind of already established that theater house where the audience is. We spent a lot of time researching the possibility of using other theater stages to maybe not have to go back there, even though it's a really beautiful facility. So I was glad that we were able to go there, because now the only thing that we did use there was the audience and the physical stage, which when it comes down to it, it's essentially a black box with a main, with a grand curtain. Not to oversimplify it, but those were the two things that we were dependent on in the location. We used a little bit of the lobby once or twice, but everything else that relates to the theater was something that we built on stage. So all of the dressing rooms and all of the hallways and all of the corridors of the dressing rooms and the garret ups, the little private room at the top of the theater that we see in episode 6 and 10. Those are all things built on sound stages.
Speaking of episode 10, that's the episode that you're nominated for opening night, and that's where we see all of these theatrical sets for the musical that you've built. I do want to ask you about other episodes in the season. I, in particular, love what you did with Loretta's apartment. I think that tells us so much about the character. She's a new character played by Meryl Streep for the season. And we learned so much about, seeing her in her built environment, her apartment. Are there other sets that you did for this season that you're particularly proud of and that were memorable versus the work you got to do on seasons 1 and 2?
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Loretta's. I love that set as well, and it turned out so great. I mean, I just got so much positive feedback for something, which is interesting because it is in real life, and it was an extremely small set, and it was kind of interesting to have to be able to pour so much information into a small room. It was scripted in story, it wanted to be a 400 square foot studio apartment or less. And normally in TV, you can cheat things to the production's convenience and usually make sets larger. Anything that's written, you could make it larger so that it's easier to film in and faster to film in, and you just more space for cameras and things. But this I really wanted to I kept it to less than the 400 square feet. And there were a lot of requirements in it, but I was able to just pack in a lot of information. And it's true that people felt like the minute they saw it, that they knew what Loretta was like, that played by Meryl. And I was thrilled about that. And just we developed some backstory for Meryl's character Loretta, and just try to insert as much decor, and I try to develop the architecture that would make sense for a small apartment, because the mandate was that Loretta had lived there for 40 years, and she was of modest means, and she was always studying to be a wannabe actress and never having quite made it, and I was very concerned of doing a character of that age that had been in an apartment for 40 years. The last thing I wanted it to do was seem like a claustrophobic or granny-like apartment. And because that's just not what this character was like. So I wanted to portray how she could, her creativity and a sense of comfort and how home was important to her. Uh, um, and so we just sort of worked that into all of the details of the wall, the collage of wallpapers and stuff like that. I really loved Mabel's apartment. That was really kind of one of my favorites to redo because in story for 2 seasons, the audience had seen it being a completely unrenovated apartment, and now it was the opportunity to have a brand new, fresh look, and that was scripted to be a like have the style of a staged apartment. So it was, it was shockingly different and nice and a fresh look compared to the down and out and constantly under construction, but never really changing apartment for 2 seasons. And then the audience got to see it right away and of course learn that it was up for sale, which is why it had that sort of very neutral and kind of New York City style staged look of a contemporary space. Loved doing that. I loved representing the penthouse apartment that has become a joke on the show now that every year they'll write somebody else staying in the penthouse apartment and therefore it just gets decorated and styled to that, usually to somewhat to that actor and certainly to the character they're playing. So in that case, it was an interior for Paul Rudd playing a really narcissistic movie star. And that was a lot of fun because the directive there was about the script was like open on a Planet Hollywood's worth of memorabilia to the celebrity Ben Glenroy, the actor. So that's all they needed to say, and we knew that like we could not, the more would be more, and we could not go too far. So had a lot of fun working as much. He was a Cobra superhero Cobra, so he was the snake character. When he by night when he was helping the police solve crime in sort of the spirit of a Marvel movie or something. And so that was really, really hilarious to work on, and hence why I developed the big Cobra sculpture for the foyer of the apartment, so that because the only way to enter this apartment is through the penthouse elevator, and you open onto this little foyer area, and so I just wanted it to be that any character that entered, the first thing they saw was this, giant overscale gilded Cobra snake. And, that would really set the tone for the attitude for the whole apartment. There was
Patrick, yeah. Patrick, congratulations on the season and all that great work, and congratulations on the Emmy nomination.
oh, thanks so much.